Hello, listeners, and welcome to this third and final part of the mini-series on the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church with Cheryl and Richard from the Get a Life podcast. If you haven't checked out this podcast yet, I highly recommend you add it to your list, available on all podcast players, and you can find out more by following the links in the episode description. But for now, here is Cheryl and Richard. The things that shocked me about the Plymouth Brethren in listening to both of you and doing some independent research is the conservative aesthetic of the group is quickly tarnished when you realize that there's a lot of drugs involved, there's a lot of moving around of certain products, and I know that this is something that you've had personal experience with, Cheryl, so I wondered if you could just tell the listeners about the type of corrupt activity that takes place within the Plymouth Brethren, even though it positions itself to be quite clean and quite conservative and godlike.
This brings me back to, I hadn't spoken to my parents for quite a few years. And I had been talking with an ex-member, and she was telling me about some drug use that was happening in a locality of people that were inside, and they witnessed, they were part of it. They had, and I took a chance and I called my parents up, and one of my brothers, if not both of them, were on the phone. And that's when I first told them about what had happened to me. I was trying to tell them that what they believe is happening in the world is happening inside there, and they would have nothing to do with it. It was a very heated discussion until I finally just blurted out that Ellen had raped me. And so getting back to the corruption, just from what I experienced, I've sat back now at 48, and you write this out, you put it down, and you're trying to think of what he was a part of and what he hands his hands into. And the priest that took over, the original priest who had it out for our family and was pushing me out because he knew what was happening with me. I mean, he'd got called to the house one time when Ellen was really hurting me, and his wife obviously got scared, called her brother, came over. So yeah, I mean, I was a transporter for drugs to places. I remember one time being taken into it was the one and only time that I was taken into this mobile home, and I had to go in by myself. Normally my lady driver or somebody met with them, and I was transferred over. And this one specific time, I was carrying a backpack, and she told me that I had to be very brave, and I had to go up to this house, and I had to go in by myself. And I remember sitting on their couch, and he opened up the backpack, and I mean, we were a very poor family. It's some images just stick with you. I couldn't believe the stack of money that came out of this backpack. And in me, however old I was young. I just remember looking at it like, just being wowed at, like, I didn't know money could be like that. I didn't know that money was like that. So I'm like, honestly, Casey, I sit back many, many times in the middle of the night when I can't sleep and be like, what the hell did even just the Maple Creek group have their hands in with? I mean, I don't talk about this on a lot of podcasts, and I'm not going to go into it, but I was taken to this huge Quonset that was a whole nother group of people. That, I mean, the shit that happened inside there, I mean, I don't know, maybe when I'm 90, I'll get the courage up to write about it. But like, my heart breaks just talking about it. But I wish so bad that my parents and the people in there knew of the absolute evil that they have their hands into, and evil that they have little kids a part of. And I mean, I know I was not the only one with my perpetrator. I know I wasn't. Everything happened way too fast. Like, you look back and you reflect and you're like, wow, like, no, there was no, like, the grooming happened fast. It was like he knew what he was doing,
And with the type of isolation that's replicated in that way around the world, it probably goes without saying that there are other individuals who are experiencing the same levels of abuse, and either believe that it's normal, believe that it's love, believe that that's what they should continue doing, or cannot think of a way to escape from that environment, because everything that they've ever known and will ever know, unless they find a way to escape, is the Plymouth Brethren. And that's the really heartbreaking part about all of this, although it is important to focus on both of your stories, in terms of you both being here now on the outside speaking out against the Plymouth Brethren. You mentioned, Cheryl, you left when you were 17. Could you just talk the listeners through how and why that happened, why you finally just said, this is enough and I am leaving for good?
So my perpetrator's the main perpetrator in everything that happened to me, his name is Ellen, and his brother-in-law and two other men kind of overtook Maple Creek. So they knocked out the elderly priest at that time, and they took it over, and they had it out for our family from day one, right? It was a long-standing feud between my grandpa and his dad. Like, it was just this long-standing feud that happened. They had more money. I honestly don't know what it was about, but it was just this feud that was there. So when I started getting of age, so I would say like 12, 13, you start looking outside the window and, finding boys fancy. The priestly visits just really started happening. They started with my dad. So my dad would be taken away on priestly visits, and they would come and pick him up, and he'd be gone for hours and hours. And he'd come back and he was so silent, rarely talking to us after them for like weeks. And there was this one time he came back, and my mom's name is Barb, and he was like, Barb, I need the phone bills. I need the phone bills. Barb, I need the phone bills. And I have to say that was probably my first real light bulb that really hit with me of like, why are you kidding me? Like, the phone bills? And every fight that I had up until right before I left I always threw that in their face of like, why? Like, tell me about the phone bills. What really got me to leave was we were having this succession of priestly visits all the time over special friendships. You're not allowed to have special friends in there. So if you're seen hanging out with one person more, like very frequently, you would get a priestly visit, right? Because that's considered a special friendship. Our house was a block away from the high school. Everybody hung out at it. I mean, we were the rebels. We were the rebels, and we hung out with the same group of people all the time. Anyhow, we had this one specific priestly visit that happened before church. Normally they happened after, and they came, and we had to set up our chairs in a specific way so that we had 4 chairs they were facing each other, and the priest sat on one side and our family had to sit on the other. And my mom actually stood up and challenged them, and in that moment got us shut up. So it's the first form of communication. It was like they shut us up immediately, because that showed that my dad wasn't the head of the household, that my mom was. And it freaked our whole family out. I mean, we were all crying, and it's like 20, 30 minutes into us crying and pleading to come back, they finally unshut us up, and we're like, okay, we can go to meeting now. So we had to walk into meeting like 20, 30 minutes late. Everybody knows what's going on, because here's our family walking in with the priest. And at this point, it was the lowest form of manipulation. I was livid. I was done. I knew I had to go to school the next day. I had to face all these people that go to there was brethren, children that I went to school with. You'd be the gossip, right? You're going to be the talk of their subjects. And that next morning before school, the head leader priest, who was kicked out, he kind of demoted, he showed up on our doorstep, and he was in tears, and he said, like, I am so sorry for what happened last night. He said, but my hands are tied. And it was in that moment I was done. I was like, but for me, done was I I was going home in spirit. I was going to end my life. I was done. I was like, there was no way I was subjecting myself to any more of this abuse. I had stayed. So Ellen had programmed me very well at everything that I was doing was helping my dad. So that was programmed very early. I mean, it's something that I'm trying to deprogram right now in therapy to be able to really let go of the grief I have for my parents, right? Is because I'm so stuck to them from such an early age of like everything that I had to do was my responsibility. So I own a lot of this responsibility that happened to me. And I mean, in this last week, it's just been really, really, the dial's been turned up to like 100%. And it took something like that for me to realize that I didn't have to stay and protect my dad anymore, that I could go home, and I was going home. I was going off the planet. I went to school that day, and I had in English class, I wrote a suicide poem. I went out and on my paper route, my mom found it and she approached me, and it made me freeze because I didn't have a backup plan in that moment, right? So it took me a whole other year to befriend anybody else who was looking to leave, right? And so that happened to me, that priest's granddaughter that I ended up leaving with, and her and I had made plans, got an apartment, and it was the librarian at the elementary school that helped us get together. I left, like literally left with nothing. And I had never been able to leave the house on my own before. And that morning, it was September 12th of 1992. That morning, I put on my scarf with its poke out of it, which I'd never done before. And I looked at my mom and I said to her, I said, can I go to the pharmacy for some contact solution? And she said, yes. And I was shocked. I was expecting this big, huge fight because I'd never been allowed to just go downtown by myself without a sister or something like that. And that day we left.
Do you think that she knew that that's what you were doing?
You know, I sit back. I actually just talked about this in therapy on Monday night. And if she didn't consciously know about it, her heart knew. I believe my mom's heart knew that there was no way that I could heal what I needed to heal in there. And there wasn't, right? I would have ended up dead no matter what, right? There was no way that I would have been able to survive in there. I know my mom knew what was happening to me. And I think it's probably one of the hardest things that I struggle with when this flares up for me. Because I'm a mother of 3 kids, right? And I try and tell myself, I know she's brainwashed and all those things, but I guess most of my fuel for this fire comes to be able to bring that mothering roar back into those females that are inside that church. And it's probably why I get so passionate on some of the podcasts, is because I just want to wake that roar up inside them to be like, don't be so freaking submissive to the point where your child, like, I mean, I had someone witness me being picked up in between meetings on a Sunday and my mom crumbling to the floor, crying to this other person, this mom, saying that she thought that was the day I was going to be sold. Like, and it explains to me, like, you just look back and you reflect and you're like, oh, that's why my mom was like this. That's why my mom was like that. That's why my mom was like this. That's why my mom never said about this. All these things start kind of compiling together. But I just, because I miss her. I miss them so badly that she had a moment in time when she stood up that I know that it existed in her. But these, pardon my French, these fucking assholes just stripped that from her. Like, that's such a, like, I know listeners are sitting here listening to that, but that's literally, they denied my mother the action of taking care of somebody who is being so brutally abused. That is a crime you can't even put on paper. That's not a crime that you can even sit down and try and explain after you die, right? Like, how do you take a crime like that and try and balance that? You know what I mean? And it just, so instead of me getting stuck in it all, I just use it to fuel me to bring this change, even though I'm dying still inside, right? So it's hard. It is very hard for me to be able to be out in the public's eye, listening to these stories, opening this book all the time. But at the same time, it really makes me not become compliant to my own healing that I have to do. Because it is very easy. It's very easy in our world to be busy, to take care of other people, to do all these things and put your own healing to the side. And I'll probably heal this till I'm 90 years old, right? It's just one of those things. It's finding how to ride it though, so that it doesn't consume you.
I wonder if your mum had a realization that day that if she didn't let you go, she would have lost you, not just spiritually, but physically as well. If you had that strong suicidal ideation. And it is hard when you have your own kids and you have your own young children and you hear stories that are really harrowing and difficult, and you realize that there are people that they're not just saying, I know someone that this has happened to, they're saying this has happened to me. And you wonder how people can let that happen. And it's really difficult to go through that journey of compassion and understanding and education when there is always that small part in the back of your mind that says, would I ever let that happen to my own children? But it's all the hypotheticals. And Chris Shelton once said to me that you can't live your life in hypotheticals, but that is part of human nature, to have that hindsight and think about those things. But it's torturous, and the grief that you're experiencing in losing that relationship with your parents is something that is spoken about quite often on the podcast, and the grief for spirituality and faith, and loss of community and friendships, and all of the good things that people experienced when they were in these abusive environments. Because it also took me a long time to realize that not 100% of cultic experiences are going to be negative. Some parts will be positive and will shape who you are, and you will carry them through with you through life, and there'll be parts of you that you've kept with you and parts that you've left behind and divorced from. And I just thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing those difficult parts of your experiences with us today. Richard, you mentioned that you were married when you were in the PBCC. Was this a marriage that came to an end when you decided that you were going to walk away for good, or was it something that you tried to maintain after you left?
No, it was something that I left when I walked away for good. I mean, I've got 5 children in there. They're all in their 20s now, that I haven't communicated with since I walked out. And it's quite hard for people who haven't had the experience to understand how the cult, the religion, their doctrines, they attack natural relationships, because the very core of their doctrine is that your connection to the church is more important than your connection to your natural relatives. I mean, they quite openly talk about it. They say, before you can get married, you've got to be married to the church. You're married to the church first, and your children belong to the church. Everything belongs to the church. They kind of allow natural families to exist, but you have to sign over all your rights. And my ex-wife, I mean, she was a good person and a kind person, but she was so deeply indoctrinated that it wasn't even worth starting that conversation with her. Plymouth Brethren, I believe, have a particularly deep indoctrination, because it's indoctrination from birth. People who've been converted into a cult have a previous existence and a previous worldview that they will typically revert to once everything falls to bits for them. But brethren don't have anything else. There's nothing to revert to. There's no other experience. Their ideas have never been challenged. And there's also a very, very strong sort of thread of doctrine in the brethren that says it's terribly evil and wicked to doubt or to oppose anything that the brethren say. I mean, we heard just recently that Bruce Hales, the supreme leader, has recently said that there's 3 levels in hell. The first level is just for your average common or garden sinner. The next level is for people like Hitler and Mussolini and, you know, all these mass murderers. And then the very lowest level in hell is for people who oppose the testimony. In other words, me and Cheryl, you know, we're right at the bottom level. And that's the mentality. And the effect is that, you know, if I was to have kind of said to my wife, well, you know, do you think this is right? That's right. It would have produced a massive kind of opposite reaction. It would have driven her further into the arms of the cult. The first thing that would have happened is that she would have phoned the priest and said, my husband said this, and he's, you know, he's losing his way and the devil's getting at him. And it's an impossibility. People have to come to their own convictions. You can't convert anyone out of it. And usually, you know, people get out by there's kind of 3 ways that people get out. There's a very interesting minority of people who, for some reason, just never get indoctrinated. They come up as children, they never believe any of this crap, and as soon as they're old enough, they go. And that they're usually very kind of extrovert and outspoken people, and you know, they come out and they're great characters because they've just got this self-confidence that they never actually got. And you know, I don't know how they do it, but you know, they're a minority. Then there are people who are kicked out. These are people who've inadvertently said something wrong, done the wrong thing, got caught up in something, and they're kicked out and they didn't want to leave, but you know, it's church discipline. And then there's people like, I suppose Cheryl's probably in this category and I am, where just by the circumstances you get so mistreated and you see so much crap that it finally erodes away all that brainwashing, and you finally, you know, at a late age in my case, realize that it's just a load of horse shit. But it takes an awful lot of beating to beat it out of you.
And sometimes a lifetime, as Cheryl said, sometimes that healing and that kind of deconstruction will be something that people will do for the rest of their lives.
Oh yeah.
The thing that you mentioned about the indoctrination from birth, what is really prevalent with this particular group is the 7th, 8th generation that are coming through, because then you don't even have the stories of your parents or your grandparents who were like, oh, when I lived in the world, or, you know, when before our family joined the Brethren. There aren't even any of those stories anymore. It is just everybody has been in. Everybody that's alive that you know has been in. You'd have to go back, you know, decades and decades to find people who have stories of not being in the Brethren. And then if you're going back that far, you're probably like, well, they were in the Seventh-day Adventists, and then they decided to move over to the Brethren, and they were allowed in.
It's exactly true. Yeah. I mean, my grandparents' stories were all about the times they met the great men. You know, they met James Taylor Sr., you know, and he stayed at my parents' house. And then there's, you know, all their stories are Brethren stories. It's a whole mythology, you know.
So you finally decided, Richard, that you were done in 2015, but that was not even 10 years ago. So I imagine that you were slowly coming around to the idea that maybe it wasn't for you anyway.
Yeah, it was a process. I mean, you build up all these doubts, you know, things happen, but you're very well trained in the Brethren to control your thoughts, control what you think.
Natural
you know,
thinking.
yeah,
No natural thinking.
And of course, you're told God can read and see all your thoughts. So you don't even dare think the bad thoughts. There's no privacy in the brethren. They see inside your skull. And so you tend to kind of accumulate all these in a sealed box in the back of your mind, and you don't think about them because they're uncomfortable, and you're worried that if you're taught again and again in the brethren that just one doubt is cyanide. It only takes 1% cyanide to kill you. So if you allow one tiny doubt in, it's going to kill you. So you accumulate all this stuff somewhere in the back of your head and never dare think about it. And then one day, you can blow up a balloon, eventually it goes pop and all this stuff comes out, and it just overwhelms you. You suddenly realize that all those bad experiences you had, you can't just explain them away anymore. This really is a broken system. This really is a load of crap. So yeah, for me, it was like this cumulative process of decades of mistreatment, and this scandal I came across. I think the thing about the scandal that I uncovered, and because it involved the very top hierarchy of the church, I suddenly realized that the rot came from the top. I mean, I'd seen a lot of crap things in the brethren, but I always assumed that the leadership was good and perfect, and that all these bad things were kind of dirt soaking up from below, and it was only the kind of bottom ranks of the brethren where this crap happened. And if only Mr. Hales was here, he would sort it all out. And then suddenly that whole worldview gets flipped completely upside down, and you realize that all the crap and corruption is coming down from the top, and actually the kind of the grassroots brethren are the best of a bad lot. And it was that inversion of what I'd always believed that was the tipping point.
It's the cult tactics of social proofing, and then when you do decide that, oh, actually, I think I'm going to speak out, then you've got leadership probably saying, all of the things that we told you about these people, that this is what happens when you let the devil in, or this is what happens when you go out into the world. And what you said about the doctrine over self, or the doctrine over blood, and separating natural families from one another, it's confirmation. It's used to confirm what the church has always said, what the teachings have always said, to divide you further, and as you said, drive like family members like your wife further into the arms of the group. It's an impossible situation, and people have to tread that line for years of, like, do I just walk away, and then do I risk the relationship with my wife and my children? It's so much more. And actually, I was reading a Twitter thread today of former cult members who were saying, one of the things that is the hardest for me to hear is, why didn't you just leave? And this is a perfect example of why people can't just leave. Cheryl, could you just tell the listeners, before we finish up today, leaving at 17, the final straw, all of the things that accumulated for you, saying, I am going to the pharmacy and I'm never coming home. How did you manage with nothing, no possessions, no family? You mentioned a librarian. Shout out to that person, because we all need those heroes in our lives. I just wondered if you could let us know what that journey looked like for you.
So I left with like $300 in my bank. I'd had a paper route. You made little bits of money there. And I thought I wasn't going to have to work for a while, right? So, the concept of finances and money, and when you actually get out to the real world, well, within days, I knew I needed to find a job. But we slept on the floor her and I slept on the floor for a while, until the librarian also, she was the landlord of this apartment building, until she realized that we didn't have a bed. And so she was associated with Salvation Army, and she got us some pots and pans, and she got us a bed. My clothes I had pushed out the window the night before to my cousin, who was already out, and he had had a little bit too much to drink. He put them up against his truck and only put in the last bag, and the other two I didn't get. So I was without clothing too. But I had to learn very fast how to try and learn how to socialize. I'm not going to lie. I used alcohol to socialize. Alcohol was my crutch on how to get over the nerves of having to talk to other people and to assimilate this whole new world. So that was a really huge crutch for me until my husband came along a couple of years later. And I still struggled with it for quite a bit in our marriage, and he was the one that really helped me pull my head out of that crutch. But it was as much fun as it was because you're 17, right? And I mean, the night we left, we were on our bikes, in my skirt, riding around. It's probably midnight, just like exploring in the dark, like what this life was going to look like. It was scary. It was really scary. But at the same time, there was this excitement of this newfound freedom, right? I mean, my biggest thing I tell people is you cannot put a price on taking that leap into freedom, right? And in this case, freedom comes with consequences, right? You still carry the grief of not having your family. As much as Mr. Hales is telling everybody right now that we deteriorate very fast after we leave, no, it is the opposite. When you gain your freedom, you take ownership of your life. You take ownership for your health and for your mental well-being. And so, yes, it is a lot of work, but I am in control of me, right? I am the one that I have to go to bed with at the end of the day. I'm the one that's in my head. I'm the one that's in my heart. And so healing happens inside freedom. And that is always my biggest message that I tell people, is that sometimes you just have to take that leap and you have to trust. You just have to trust that everything is going to be there for you, because it is. I mean, I haven't heard of really horrible stories of people leaving and being yes, there's people sleeping in cars, and yes, there's all these things, but eventually you find your way, right? You do find your way. I don't regret. I would do it all over again, 100%. I mean, my bar days were the funnest days I've ever had. It was just nice to get out and just dance and let it go,
But you have a podcast now, Cheryl. Isn't that the most fun?
Yeah, that's true.
So, Richard, you've mentioned that you're working on a memoir. You have some top secret files that you're sitting on. What are your immediate plans in terms of activism? 55,000 members. I know there's going to be pockets of people that we could never, ever reach. But with the work that you're doing, there's a chance that in our lifetime, this group might not really exist.
Well, yeah,
mean,
definitely.
It's not an impossible thought, I don't think.
No, I mean, they are cults are fragile. And the biggest threat ever to their existence is the internet, because their whole existence depends on controlling people's communications and access to information. And it's never, ever been easier to actually break through that barrier. So, yeah, I think they're fragile. And they're also fragile because it's a one-man band. It all hangs on the leader. If he wakes up and has a bad day, he can screw it all up. He could lose the whole thing in an hour if he says the wrong thing. It's another unique thing about the Brethren is it all hangs on one man. Jehovah's Witnesses have got a sort of a governing committee, which, they're not going to suddenly do something extreme because they've all got to come to a consensus about it. Brethren, it's Bruce Hales's private club.
And dictators do topple.
Oh, they do.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they're fragile. And if we help one person to escape, it's been worthwhile. I don't have ambitions to bring the whole thing down. What I would like to see, I mean, what I think is entirely achievable is making enough publicity about their, extremely unpleasant and damaging practices that their taxation status is threatened.
Yeah.
They will do anything for money. And if they had to choose between either losing their charitable status or giving up on their separation excommunication doctrine, they would throw the doctrine in the bin. And that's
I feel
entirely
like
achievable. Yeah.
Canada is really at the forefront of making some of those changes with big religious groups as well, as far as my understanding goes.
Not really. I mean, religious. I mean, Norway has
Norway.
just kind of kicked the Jehovah's Witnesses out of their financial status. There was a court case in Belgium where, again, Jehovah's Witnesses were prosecuted for the shunning doctrine. I mean, it's coming. The world is getting increasingly secular, and
Mm.
the kind of idea that governments, the parliament starts the day with a prayer, and you've got a bunch of bishops in the House of Lords just because they're bishops. I mean, this is all looking increasingly Harry Potter, isn't it? And the tide is not going in the brethren's favor. So, I think we're at a point in time where a few people with a podcast can really make a big difference.
Absolutely, especially when it's individuals' personal experiences and survivor testimony. Again, it's not, it's not me researching from websites and court cases. It's you people, your stories, you're coming forward and saying, this is what happened to me. It's, it's not something that needs to be quantified. It's something that is reality, and it was my reality. I know that Canada have a microscope on the Mormon church at the moment in terms of
That's
finances.
True. Yeah.
So hopefully, if we're looking at tax exemption status, or churches with the tax exemption status, there's a chance that more dangerous practices could come under the microscope. So we have our fingers crossed for that.
Yeah.
To finish up, Cheryl, could you please tell the listeners the name of your podcast and where they can find it, and also any other websites or social media pages and platforms that people can reach out to if they'd like to get in touch?
Yeah, so our podcast is called Get a Life Podcast. We're on YouTube. We're also on Anchor that ships it out to, all the other platforms. And by the time this airs, there will be a website that is up and going, and we most likely should have our charity status. We should be, by the time this airs, we should have our charity status, and we also have that all up and going. And that website is the Olive Leaf Network. And so it is a global website that has all the different countries on it that you'll be able to contact. People from inside can contact us. There's a lot of resources on there. And so that's launching here right away for New Zealand. Yeah, New Zealand. Yeah, it's New Zealand that's going. And then ours, as soon as our charity status comes in, it will be up and running. Yeah,
that's absolutely fantastic. Richard, do you have any last words for anybody who might be listening from the inside today, in terms of things that you might say to somebody if you had the opportunity to talk to a Plymouth Brethren member?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, to start with, do not believe all the lies and the stories that everyone who leaves goes down the drain. Those of us who've left would never ever go back. Our only regrets is that we wasted so much time in there. What I would say to you is, what you need to be scared of if you stay in the Brethren is that you come to your deathbed and realize you had never actually lived.
Yeah.
Very well said. I feel like that must be something you've said before, Richard, because that just kind of rolled off the tongue. Well, thank you both so much for coming to share your stories today. It's similar to why I spoke to two people called Dan and Erica about their experiences in KwaZulu-Ubuntu, which I've mentioned in this episode. And Dan's approach is very clinical and is very, sort of talks about the history of things, and then Erica is the person that is like she's the warrior, she's the person that's like, I'm going to save everybody, I'm going to get all of the kids out, and she's really emotional and she's passionate and she's beautiful. I feel that dynamic between the two of you here, and you're covering all of the ground with both of those approaches, and I think it's absolutely incredible the work that you're doing and the changes that you have already made to people's lives, to each other, to yourselves, and all of the people that you'll be able to reach through this work that you're doing as well. Thank you both so much for your time
Thank
today.
you for having us on. Thank
I'm
you
really
so much.
excited. I'm excited to see where you'll be when this episode airs, and from a year from now as well. Maybe we'll have to have a little catch-up update when
Absolutely.
things really start moving. So thank you both. Thank you both so much.
Yep. You're
Thanks
very
so
welcome.
much, Lucy.
Yep.
Both take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. For more information on Cheryl and Richard's podcast Get a Life, you can follow the links in the episode description. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.